I kind of wish I had that perspective because yeah, that's kind of what it was. It felt like it was like,
What just
and I think
happened?
has since been validated. And
What
now
just happened?
yeah, sorry, I had to go get my computer charger.
Okay.
I had to just get up and walk away. I tried to play it off like it wasn't a deal, but
Yeah, well, the camera's like just on your mouth for a
yeah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Long Form Conversations, the podcast where we talk about long form improv. I am your host, David, and I want to start off by, first of all, just thanking you for listening. I've been getting a lot of people reaching out, telling me that they've been checking out the podcast, that they've been sharing it with some classmates and with some fellow improvisers. So I really appreciate you doing that. Another thing you can do if you really want to help support, along with sharing it with all of your peers, is by subscribing, rating, reviewing, whatever the platform you're listening on. I'm sure there's all sorts of different functions and call to actions I could give you, but whatever you can do, really appreciate it, just to get the word out there. Another thing just to mention, in case I haven't enough on this podcast, but I don't really have like a website or social media for this. So the main place, if you want to reach out or if you want to, suggest a guest, or if you'd like to be in the podcast, at David D. Long on Instagram is the best way to reach out to me. That's where I post and promote the show. So make sure that you are, again, rating, reviewing, and if you want to reach out to me directly, at David D. Long on Instagram.com. Great. So with that, we're going to go ahead and dive into our episode now. Our guest today is someone who is pretty good with the social media game, with the promotion game, someone who knows how to do a lot of the improv stuff online. This is a talented improviser, streamer. Would you call yourself an actor or a writer?
Yeah, I would say I'm an actor, a little bit a writer, but more an actor.
All right, great. Well, you just heard his voice. This is Chris Tcholakian.
Hello, thank you for having me. And I just now subscribed to your YouTube, David. So that plug worked at the very least on me, and that's one.
Great, thank you. Every bit helps. Now I think I'm up to 8, and boy, we are really rocking it. One of the hyphenates that I gave you was a streamer. Is that the official title that you would like, or what would you call it?
Well, I guess so. I don't know. It's very weird, but I guess I am technically a Twitch streamer. It's not something I thought I was going to be or expected to be or know really how to do very well. But I think, I think that is technically what I'd be called.
Chris is being modest. He is one of the most successful, shall we say, the most successful improv streamer on Twitch.
I think certainly our true, like there's 4 of us, and I would say I don't know of another group of people doing improv on Twitch that are as doing as well as we are. There's just like guys who kind of do something that's slightly improv in nature, and those people can have bigger followings, but I think we are the first sort of like improv group doing live interactive shows, and I can get much more narrow and specific to make us even more the only ones doing it in front of a green screen that's live edited with once I can really get rigid about what we are, we're the most successful in that category, certainly.
Twitch Just Chatting, is that right?
It's just that's like the category we're in, but we're the Everything Now show on twitch.tv. So it's twitch.tv/Everything Now show. And it was started by these 2 guys, one of whom still does it. And then that was like 5 years ago. And then me and a couple other people joined very shortly after. And so for the last like 5 years, I've been doing that show with primarily, it's like there's been 7 of us over the 5 years. Right now there's 4 of us. And then we have tons of guests and people on, such as David, who came on very recently and was great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I had the pleasure of being on the show just last week, and it was a blast. So I'm gonna age myself a little bit, but please help me out here. I don't really know Twitch. I've obviously opened Twitch. I've obviously watched Twitch before, but as far as the mechanics, the community, the way that you even interact, that's a little bit foreign to me. So that's why when I mentioned the whole just chatting, because I've seen them separated by games. So like if I want to watch just Counter-Strike, I can do just Counter-Strike. If I don't watch online poker, I can watch just online poker.
Yes,
I know that
exactly.
there's one that's just chatting. So can you tell us more about that system or how that ecosystem works?
Yeah, that is it. So Twitch for a long time was pretty much just video game streamers. I mean, they had some other stuff, and you could kind of search by those. And then there was another category that was just like just chatting, which was basically like you're not playing a video game, and it was very broad. And we found that to sort of be okay. We can be on this website because Twitch by far has the best interactivity built into it. There's a ton of programs catered specifically for that website where you can trigger sound alerts, subscriptions, things like that. Like the live streaming capabilities are much better than say YouTube or Facebook or other TikTok where you can do live streaming. And yeah, it's been it's very weird because there is a real internet culture that I feel kind of on the outside of, and I'm like the people who watch the show, I'd say are most of them are at least my age, but I somehow feel like older than them because I don't understand the kind of like hyper internet specifics they're talking about. So I feel like this old man.
Yeah, I also really like the interactivity aspect of it because kind of like you mentioned, it's a culture that kind of grows on its own, and the art form of streaming, live streaming is its own thing. And you can, if you, I don't know how much crossover there is with improv and streaming, but there is just so much going on there. Like you mentioned, there's sound effects, there's little gifts that you can give, and just being able to incorporate all that and utilize that rather than trying to like ignore it, I think is really smart, really great.
And this is maybe a whole bigger conversation, but I really think like improv is best kind of in the room with the person. Like you really kind of want to be there watching it happen. It's almost like magic, where like if you're watching a tape of someone doing magic, you're like, that's not, your brain isn't quite tricked in the way it's supposed to be. So we were kind of feeling like just like doing long form improv online is like that's not quite. And then when the pandemic hit and there were all these Zoom call improv shows and stuff, it was like, no, this is really not it. And I think it's actually giving people a negative connotation. And so we found like when you can have the audience like really, instead of giving a word at the top, like really moving the show forward, um, it creates this like give and take, this symbiotic relationship almost with you and the audience. And that actually, it makes them feel more involved because they're like pitching jokes in some cases. And it makes, for me at least, like I feel more excited because I'm like playing off even more than just my scene partners. Now I'm like playing off audience pitches and I'm like having them kind of, oh, which direction are we taking the scene now? So it makes the whole thing feel a lot more like communal in a way and engaged with the audience that I think really excites us.
Yeah, and I think a huge leg up that you all have is you mentioned that you've been doing this for 5 years, and I think any art form will evolve over time. Even in-person improv, the first 5 years I bet were pretty garbage, and it took them time to figure out what works and what doesn't. I was really pleased to see how much you have like put into it because I've seen the front end, of course, but to see the back end and see how much you have all developed that
Once
is
you're in
again
the
like wow,
garage, yeah.
its own little studio, which is great.
Yeah.
And I hope, more people invest in that, especially the folks that can't get out to the major cities for improv. There's definitely a space for them, and you're kind of proving that.
Yeah, and I think not coincidentally, a lot of our audience are not from major cities. And I think, for them it's like, where is kind of where is that sort of entertainment being scratched? And I think they found it. And that's, I think, kind of the promise of the internet is like you can get in front of people you wouldn't normally be able to.
Yeah. So if you are one of my listeners who is in a kind of more less centralized improv scene, uh, what is it? Everything now dot twitch dot TV.
Twitch.tv/everything now show.
Yeah, check it out. It's a great place to like Chris mentioned, kind of just watch like long form improv in a way like that's more, and you can also participate with it. So it's
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
different from the maybe typical Zoom improv shows you may be used to seeing.
Yeah, I think if you like improv, I think you will be excited by this show. At the very least, it
Yeah.
will fascinate you.
Uh, and speaking of being in the city, Chris, you were in Los Angeles. You were on a team with me.
That's
Uh,
right.
we've been on a Lloyd team at UCB for the past 5 months now. What's going through your head? How's that experience been for you, man?
Oh, dude, I mean, I love our team so much. We have 2 shows left at the time of this recording, and I am like already mourning the team. I'm already like, oh man, because I think I took my first UCB class 2016. And I did my first audition 2017. And I was not getting it, obviously, for years and years. And I would get callbacks or I'd get the invite to the mess hall audition or whatever, but I just like couldn't get over that final thing. And I think I built it up in my head a lot. And I was like, man, if I could ever get it, it would be so cool. And then pandemic hits, I try to forget about it. They announce auditions. I'm like, okay, I'll get rejected one more time. Why not? And I go and I actually get on the team. And I remember like thinking, you know, prepare yourself for it not to be as good as you have built it up in your head to be. Like, don't come into this thinking it's going to be the best thing in the world or whatever. And it's been the best. Like I have we all play so well together. The shows are so fun. We get to do them at Franklin. I love our coach. Like we're going to birds after and talking to like it's all the things that like 22-year-old Chris was like very excited about. And it really is like fulfilling all that fantasy for me. So I love our team and I've really had such a good time these past 5 months.
Yeah, at the risk of putting this on a higher pedestal than it may already be, I'm on the same page with you, man. Like I started, back in 2017, and most of the shows I work full time, so most of the shows I could catch were inner sanctum shows and sunset shows on the weekends, because it was like right after class, let me just hang out and watch a couple shows. So I grew up like really digging the mess hall teams. Couldn't make it to Hero Night on Mondays, so it just like became such an important thing for me. And I will also say like it lives up to the hype. Again,
Yeah.
I don't want to make it like people feel more like anxious about it than they may already be feeling, but it's been a really great feeling. It's everything you think it would be, and I think we really did luck out with this team and with our coach and everything.
Yeah, and getting to be the first Lloyd teams and we're performing at Franklin right after Herald Night. I mean, like I feel and we're going very consistently every other week. Like I feel like we got super lucky in just the time we got on.
Yeah, I haven't really had a chance to dive into this with too many of my previous guests, even though most of them are all, most of them have played on house teams before. But I do want to ask you, because I think it's such a unique experience that you and I share. But that first opening night for Lloyd Night, and it was 10 p.m. And it was sold out, and there were people like standing in the sides and people sitting on stage. How did you feel about that? Because I think especially for I don't know about you, that was the biggest audience I've ever played for in my life.
I was I was petrified. Our first show, I think I said like 3 things. I was so nervous the whole time. Uh Visibly like shaky during our first show. It has worn off now for sure, but um I remember just like being so scared that I was gonna like do it wrong, even though I've been doing it for years. Somehow I was like, well, what if I just forget how to do all of it right away? Um, but it was a really good show. I mean, I think probably hard to have a bad show with that audience. Everyone's very supportive, and it's the first show. It's everyone's friends in the audience or whatever. But we had a great first show. Um, and then from then I got more and more comfortable. And yeah, every show I get so excited beforehand.
Yeah, it's definitely been a great 5 months, and yeah, looking forward to the improv future.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's kind of where we are with improv today. but I want to dial it back in and hear about your improv journey. So we're going to go ahead and jump into our first segment now, which is Improvster Syndrome. So this is the opportunity to hear about your improv journey and what you went through and how you felt to get to where you are now.
All right. So I grew up in New York, right next to UCB Chelsea. So I actually grew up on 8th and 30th. UCB Chelsea, when I was a kid, was 8th and 26th. I think they were originally at a different location, but for most of my childhood, they were 8th and 26th. They were right next to Gristedes, and that Gristedes was where my family would do grocery shopping. So I always saw UCB. And I remember as a child thinking, like, that looks really bad. And like, I saw the awning with the name. I was like, it looked really like silly to me. And I was like, I don't want to do that. That looks dumb. And my older sister, who's like 10 years older than me, she was like, no, this place is really cool. Like, you have to come check. She was trying to get me and my brother always. She was like, you guys got to come to this theater. This was probably like 2004. So she's seeing, like, you can only think about the people who were doing UCB in like 2004. And she's going there with her friends pretty regularly. And I'm like, no, not interested at all. She gets me to go one night when I'm like 16 to a Gravid Water show, which I don't know if you know Gravid Water. It's like the one act play thing, and one of the people has a script, the other doesn't. And Jason Sudeikis was one of them that night, and his thing was so good. And I remember being like, oh, okay, like, that is actually kind of cool, but I would never ever be able to do that. Like, that's completely foreign to me. So I'm a kid, and I'm a high schooler, and I really like comedy, and I'm watching SNL and movies and all that stuff. Very just like film nerd, comedy nerd kid, very standard trajectory there. And I get to college, I'm going to a film school. One of my good friends who I meet like on the first week is a guy I still do everything now with today. He tries to get me to go to the improv auditions, and I'm like, no chance. Initially I was like, maybe I will, and then we sit at this table before the auditions. We go get food with a bunch of people, and they're all like shouting German accents and poop jokes at each other, because the understanding is we're all about to try out for improv. So it's everyone's just putting their worst instincts are on display right now. And I just like sat quietly and watched it. And when he got up, I like pulled him aside and I was like, hey, I'm not going. Good luck up there. And
So this was at Chapman,
freshman
right?
year of Chapman, freshman year of college.
And you were your friend had pulled you onto audition knowing that you probably had seen improv, you probably admired improv, but never done any improv.
Yeah, yes. And he had done some programs in high school or whatever. And he was like, you're funny in conversation. Like, you want to do comedy, like, go try it. But I pull him aside and I'm like, if that's what it is, no way am I doing that.
Not even like any performing arts in high school.
I did like drama in high school. I remember actually like the best moment for me still is like really up there for me is in the 10th grade, me and a friend for our drama final project performed Who's on First, the Abbott and Costello routine, where I was Costello, which today I would certainly be Abbott, but somehow I managed to pull being Costello. And it went so well. It like killed like everyone's, and I went to an international school, so it was a bunch of like foreign parents who were just like loving the language game of Who's on First, and it was just crushing in the room. And I remember that being like the first moment I was like, oh, I kind of like performing and like getting laughs. That's very fun. But I think I still thought of myself as like a writer or a filmmaker. So, and I was making like movies with some friends, very small, kind of stupid things. So my buddy doesn't get on the first time. He re-auditions in the spring. He does get on.
Really quick, did any of those dudes doing the German poop jokes, did any of them get on?
No.
What? What do they want there?
So he gets on after that semester. So midway through freshman year, Jake gets on. And I like go to see a show. And I remember thinking at first, like, I'm not gonna like it. And then I watched it, and it was again kind of when I watched Gravid Water. I was like, oh, I could never do this. Like, this is so impressive. The fact that they're just making this up as they go, unbelievable. I would never be able to do this.
Now, is improv at Chapman? Is it long form? Is it short form? What's
It's
the?
both. And they teach actually right out. I mean, we at the time, I don't know what they're doing now, but we at the time, like when I got on, the president was teaching right out of the UCB handbook. So he would bring the UCB handbook. And so we were learning, we would alternate shows between a long form show and a short form show. And of course, the audience just wanted the short form shows, but we just wanted the long form shows. So it was the give and take, one for them, one for us kind of thing. But Jake gets on and then he's like really trying to talk me into it. And there's a guy I know who I took a class with who I didn't think was very funny. And Jake tells me that he has gotten on the team. And I remember being like, if that guy can do it, maybe I can do it. Which is maybe not the best mentality to have.
No, I mean, I don't know. Like, it's so true that how much competition fuels or like, invigorates or motivates you to do better.
Yeah. So I
If
go
that
to
guy
the
got on,
yeah. I was like, how
yeah,
hard could it be if he's thriving in it?
yeah.
So I go to the audition in the fall, and just like for a fluke, like our school, the improv team was kind of a big deal. And the first one that Jake went to that he didn't get on, there was like 120 people auditioning, and like 5 people get in, 6 people. When I went, for some reason, there was like 35 people at the audition. Like it was incredibly small. So me and another guy who's still doing everything now with me today, we both get on. And I maintain, had it been any other semester, I would not have gotten on. But it was just kind of like the timing lined up perfectly. And I get on and I become like really into it. And I remember like going back home and being like, God damn it, like UCB was right there the whole time. Like I should have been going to shows. I should have started taking classes when I was like 15. And I get so into it. That's like my thing all throughout college. Like I'm kind of becoming less and less interested in film and more interested in improv. And by junior summer vacation between junior and senior year, I'm back in New York and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a UCB class, and I take 101.
Before we jump into that, what was the structure like at Chapman? Was it weekly practices? How long did it go for? What did you guys kind of work on?
Twice a week, 2 hours each practice. It would be Sundays and Mondays, and then the shows would be every other week.
That's a pretty intense schedule.
It was a lot, and particularly when I first started, there was like a huge buy-in from everyone. Like there was a lot of like, I think because we were kind of like,
You're a freshman and sophomore. You don't really have, no offense, but you don't have like a social life until.
yes,
You know what I mean?
yeah, and I think that because our shows were very well attended, we had this notion that like, oh, this is a worthwhile thing. It certainly didn't make us popular. Like we were incredibly insular and didn't talk to anybody. I mean, me at least, but I think most of them as well. But we all kind of bought in. But yeah, so then I'm doing that and I'm like really loving it. The audiences aren't loving me too much. And I remember being very frustrated by that. Like I'm not, you can still see this in my improv today. I'm not like the most pirate style improviser. Like I'm not going out there with huge characters and broad comedy. And, I'm a lot more reserved. I like to set people up. We can talk about during support moves.
You can get some characters out of you sometimes though. Some of them.
Yeah.
You could do a pretty good Cartman from South Park, can't you?
Yeah. I did put that in the Discord about finally for them, and it was a very bad impression. But the audiences at this college thing, they wanted me to talk about vaginas, and they wanted me to be the silly German man, like that was what they were all kind of after. So I wasn't doing that, and the audiences there were not super into me. And like I remember often people would come up to the people on the improv team standing next to me and be like, I love you guys are all so great, and then like not know that I was on the improv team. So I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder about that, of like, I feel like I'm good at this, like I feel like I'm doing well, but I'm not like broad in this way. So I go take a 101.
And that's a tough thing to do, especially being young. Did you want to be that? Did you like kind of like, I gotta get bigger and more piratey, or were you more like, no, what I'm doing is good and it's funny, and my teammates appreciate and like that? Or what was it?
It was that, because in practice, you would know that I was doing a good job. And I was just like, I was very stubborn, maybe to my detriment, where I was like, I know this is working. And like, I know I'm making my team laugh. I know I'm setting them up for laughs. Like, I know I'm doing a lot of the important work of the scene. And like, I probably should have tried to be a little more broad. I definitely should have. But I just kind of had this like chip on my shoulder about like, I know that there's a way that what I'm doing is right. And so I take this 101 class, and that was the first time I felt really validated about it, because I was doing just very grounded improv, and it was playing so well in those classes. And then I do 201, I do 301, 201 and 301. I'm driving up to LA in my senior
Oh yeah.
year.
So sorry. So summer, you said the summer between junior, senior, that
Yeah.
was just 101. That's like 10 weeks,
It's
right?
just 101. I think I did it in intensive twice a week thing.
Okay.
Um, and then I loved it. So I come back to LA. Molly Thomas was my 101 teacher in New York. I come back to LA. I take 201 with, to this day, my favorite improv teacher of all time, Jill Donnelly. She does not teach anymore, but she was the sweetest, kindest woman. Loved her so much.
Did you go by yourself, or did you take some of your teammates with you?
By myself. I would drive up on Saturdays, very long drive.
Yeah.
And I would do the class, and I would drive down, and I met some people there that I still kind of talk to. But Jill is the one like I really credit for, like, she really liked what I was doing, and she really could recognize that like what I was doing was good and was very encouraging. And I think even pulled me aside at the end of maybe our last class or our class show. There was some moment where she pulls me aside and she was like, you should really keep doing this. Like, you're really good at this, and I can sense how much fun you have while you do it. You're a great like scene partner. You're very kind. Like, I really hope you'll keep pursuing this.
Let's keep talking about that for a second, because
Mhm.
as someone who's played with you, I would agree. I'm probably what I'm seeing you do now. There are probably traces of it back then, but you're a very patient person. I think you also just play things very grounded. Even when you are playing the unusual person, you kind of embody the philosophy. You don't need to add flourish or an accent or a different posture. You're just like, well, now I'm Chris, but I believe XYZ. Where does that instinct come from? Was that something that was influenced from taking drama, from Gravid Water, from, I don't know,
Good
your
question.
art or your film enthusiasm?
It's a good question. You know, I think back to that thing we've been talking about with James a little bit lately, where it's like the three factors of a game, and it's when you heighten one, you decrease another, and it's kind of a give and take. So for me, it's like I can recognize, and I see it in other people all the time, where they are an unusual person and they're so deep in their character, and it's really entertaining. Like, when someone's really a great character actor and they're playing an unusual person in a scene, like, it's so fun, and I can recognize that. But then I think you sacrifice this realness, that, because it's like I've never seen this person in my day-to-day life, you know? And like, it's fun, it's entertaining. Whereas I relate much more to the like, on the surface, this person seems normal, but then they have these unusual things. And it's like what you maybe lose in the theatricality, you gain in the like uh realness of the scene. And then there's a better way to say that, I'm sure. But I've just always felt that like I didn't grow up with a very big theater background. I mean, we took one drama class, but like I wasn't doing the school play or musical or whatever. Like, I was not very outgoing. I've always been very reserved, but I've always felt like I was funny. And I was like, again, it's this kind of chip on my shoulder where I was like, there's a way to be funny without like taking over the room. And I think like the most enjoyable moments for me is like when you can be funny in a really subtle way. And that's the stuff that I personally cling to the most. Thinking even back to like I love like Bob Newhart, who to me really embodies that. Like, Bob Newhart's never going to be a broad guy. but he'll be so damn funny. Judd Hirsch, who's in Taxi, he'll sometimes be kind of broad, but like he has this sardonic thing about him that's just so captivating to me. Groucho Marx. So it's like those are the kinds of people where I'm like, that is so funny to me. That's the thing I love the most. And so it's just how my brain is thinking all the time. Yet I can recognize, like, if someone's a really great character actor, I would never tell them like, hey, tone that down, because it's like that's to their detriment, like it's what everyone has their kind of style in.
Yeah, I think it's great that you kind of found your natural voice, your comedic sensibilities so early, and you stuck to it. It's great that you're able to discover that and find out so early on, and also not get swayed into, gosh, I can't even imagine if you were like a, Adam Sandler type. That might be
Yeah,
look
yeah.
off on you.
And every teacher I've had since has been like, you got to kind of try to play that other side too, which I think is, on one hand, they're going, hey, you've got this down. Like, it's time to it's time to push yourself in the next way. And I do try to push myself, maybe not during shows for Lloyd, because I'm like, we only have like 12 of these. Like, I'm going to try to like support the team in the thing that I'm best at. But like, if we're doing practice, or if I'm doing everything now, I might go for something a little more broad and goofy. It never quite feels authentic, but I think I'm like trying to move towards a place where it can. But yeah, I think like, it's same thing like Alex Fernie, for instance. You watch Alex Fernie, you're like, no, I don't need him to be like a big, silly German guy, like that's not what I'm looking for in this guy. And then you see someone like Billy Merritt, and you're like, if Billy Merritt just did every scene as himself, it would be boring. Like, he's so captivating. He's such an amazing character actor that like,
Sure, lean on your strengths. Yeah.
Yeah.
So after you get back and you start taking these classes, how is this starting to feel? I mean, this is, again, you are a senior in college, so you're still balancing a bunch of coursework and you're driving up on the weekends.
Yeah, no. I mean, there was a while I was getting pretty nuts, where I was taking 12 credits in school, producing a friend's movie. I was doing 3 days a week of an internship at Gary Sanchez and Funny or Die. So I would drive up to LA 3 days a week, and then a fourth day as well, because I was taking 301 or 401. And so I was just like completely, I was like working myself ragged, and I was doing my college improv team. So that's like 2 to 3 of those, plus the show, plus the UCB team, plus doing 3 days of internship, plus taking 12 credits. Like, it was a really bad idea in hindsight. Wore myself out. But I think part of the reason I could manage it was like I was so enthralled with taking UCB. So my 301 teacher was Brennan Lee Mulligan. Really loved him. Great teacher. Then my 401 teacher was Billy Merritt. And again, like, I loved him. I was having a great time in his class. And in all these classes, I'm feeling very validated, because I'm going back to this thing where in my college team, I'm not talking about boobs or speaking in silly voices enough. And I'm feeling so frustrated of like, I feel like what I'm doing is right. But then I go to UCB and I'm like, yeah, I fucking knew it. Like, I knew that this was good improv. So I'm feeling really good about it. And I'm like, excited to keep doing it more. And so then I graduate college and I get a job as a production assistant through my internship. And any money I get extra, because I'm working so goddamn often, I have no social life. I'm not doing anything. So I'm just like Monday to Friday, office PA, working like 14 hours. Saturday, I do a UCB class. Sunday, I sleep, and I was doing that for like all of second half of 2017 through to the end of 2019, because
wow, 2 years, you're really like burning yourself out, man.
Yeah, I really did. And it really caught up with me like right before the pandemic. And then the pandemic was kind of didn't help, but it was like, okay, I'm going to be burnt out anyway, so I'll be inside.
let's talk about the Everything Now show. How did you find that, or how did you decide to start that, and let's talk about that journey.
So pretty much everyone, 6 of the 7 people who have been key creatives on that show were on that college improv team. Rocky and Alex started it in their house like 5+ years ago now, and it was like a fake public access show, kind of something more like Wayne's World. Jake joined shortly after, Julie joined, I joined a little bit after. Julie has since left, Alex has since left, this girl Sydney came and left, and then Grant, who we met like 2 years ago, has joined the fold. So now it's me, Rocky, Jake, and Grant. But it was started basically like Alex was taking UCB classes as well, but was very frustrated. He felt it was very insular, and he couldn't really get to do a lot of what he wanted to do, that he was kind of spinning his tires in advanced study. Very talented improviser, Alex, too, definitely. So he wanted, and him and Rocky, they're pretty tech savvy guys. They had this big gaming PC, and they wanted to like try to rig it to do like live streaming stuff. They had a DSLR, and they were like, what if we can kind of just make our own show, kind of, you know? So it definitely sprung from like frustration, you know, trying to find something that caters more specifically to them. I joined like a few months in. When they started it, I was still in New York at the time, but I came back. I joined a few months in, and I was like, this is really interesting. I don't really know what it is or what it's kind of building to, but it's very interesting. And at first it was like this public access show, fake thing, where he was like an art guru who was trying to like challenge the notions of art. Then it became like PowerPoint presentations almost. We had an animated brain in a jar named Dr. Teacher. And he was the host of like this almost like faux children's show. And we would do PowerPoints on different topics. And because Twitch is all about being online all the damn time. So we were like, how do we, you know, we were doing one show a week, heavily written. And we were like, how do we kind of stream more?
Yeah, what was those initial couple of shows like? What numbers were you getting? What type of interaction were you getting?
Oh, the chat was like me. Like I was the only one in the audience. I was working as a production assistant in New York, and I had the night shift. So I would just be sitting at my desk at like 1 a.m, no one else there, and I would just be watching this show. You know, it was Alex's mom, it was me, it was Jake, it was Julie. It was nobody, you know. And then over time, like when we started doing the PowerPoints, I think we were probably averaging like 10 viewers at that point. Again, a lot of them are just like us in the chat, friends of ours. Then we had the big kind of breakthrough came like almost like, I want to say 40 to 50 episodes in, when in trying to get more viewers, we were like, we have to stream more. We were doing like, let's do our regular show on Sunday, then on Wednesday we'll do kind of like a looser show. It'll be an interview show, or it'll be something. And we did this one show where we had established Rocky had a character that was a tattoo artist, and he was going to be driving around for Lyft to make extra money on the side. And so we were all just like hopping in and out of his Lyft as just ridiculous people. And that's the format you did last week. Like we still do that to this day. It's probably my favorite of the formats. And when we did it, it was this like, it was this moment where everything sort of lined up, where we were like, oh my God, like you pick a host character, you give them a setting to be in, we have our wall of costumes and everything, and people are just hopping in and out with a character game, with a game, and they're playing off of each other, and you're going out there for 5 to 15 minutes or whatever.
It's kind of like rediscovering improv, you know, like finding a good form or a good, you know, short form game to make it fit the audience. Like even now that I hear you describe it, did you ever play this? It's an exercise. It's more of a short form exercise. I think it's called Goalkeeper or something like that. The idea is you have one person in the middle, and then everybody lines up and they bring a different character. And this person's role is to be the voice of reason for everything that's going on.
Oh,
So they kind
wow.
of come on, and then you have to kind of like, so they initiate, you it might not be called goalkeeper, but it's like a sports drill.
I
Maybe
would have a
where
great
that came
time
from.
doing that.
But then you just kind of label what's going on and say, yep, that's exactly what's going on. And then the next person comes on. So I think it is really creative. I think it's really smart to, you know, there's always like this talk of like how much should artists like concede to what the audience wants, but you kind of need that relationship.
Yeah, especially with improvisation. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it's so inherent to what we do.
So if an audience is telling you, you know, like if they're responding a lot to more characters and more variety, you'd be crazy to not give them that. You'd be crazy to be
Yeah,
like,
and
no, we're
I
gonna
will
keep
also
doing these
say,
one act
like,
shows.
we enjoyed it a ton. Like that episode, at the end of it, we were all like buzzing because we were like, wow, this was so fun. It was very easy to set up. We can do this multiple times a week, no problem. And like we could feel the energy of it too. And the audience certainly liked it a lot. And it was still a really small audience at the time, probably like we're talking 15 people watching at the time. I mean, you know, for context, we're now averaging about 90 to 100 people watching at any given time in an episode, which usually works out to like 200 to 250 unique viewers per show. So
That's a packed Franklin for 2 hours, baby.
exactly, that's what that's what we're arguing. It's like that's a full black box theater every night, 4 nights a week.
So tell me what the pandemic days look like for you.
Well, I think everyone assumes it was going to be really great for us, but it definitely wasn't. We had a lot of momentum just before the pandemic, and then when the pandemic hit, you know, especially in the very beginning, like we didn't think we could be in the same room as each other because we were like we lived in 3 different houses between the 5 of us. At the time, it was 5 of us. And one of the people on our team, like his girlfriend was very immunocompromised. We were like, we do not want to risk it. And we had to kind of figure out how to integrate like Zoom calls into the show. It was awkward, like, and it was frustrating. And it definitely hurt our numbers. We couldn't stream as consistently as we wanted to. I think the
You were
quality
probably I just realized you're probably competing with everything else that was going on then.
that as well, a bunch of
Then
people
Netflix
who
started, right? Tiger King, you have to compete with Tiger King.
yeah, and a bunch of people who wouldn't have been on Twitch suddenly were on Twitch. So it was harder to get, you know, audience share. We weren't streaming as consistently. We tried to do like side streams. Like I did a 48-hour stream in April of 2020 where I was on for 2 consecutive days. I just slept on camera for a lot of it.
Enthralling. It's a wonder why that didn't work.
I know. You'd think people wanted to watch me sleep for 16 hours, but for whatever reason, so the pandemic was actually pretty tough on the show. And I would say we survived through it rather than like thrived in it. Like it could have gone away during the pandemic, honestly, because it was so tough to, you know, how do we adapt to this thing? And now it's honestly, I think we did the smart thing of like, we kept it going best we could through that. And then once we were all able to be in the room together again, we were like, we had the formula, stick to what was working.
Yeah, but it's great because you had this thing to focus on. I know for a lot of folks, you know, those first couple months when improv was, you know, not happening, even Zoom improv wasn't really happening. It was you know, a lot, and you can really like lose yourself in whatever that was going on. Lose yourself to the news, lose yourself to reality TV, to Tiger King.
Oh yeah, I definitely went insane during the pandemic. Absolutely.
So it's great you had that, and also, you know, again, like you mentioned, Zoom improv isn't great, but it was better than nothing. And
yeah,
you had this. You had a workable show, a workable format, people that perform regularly. So I guess that's kind of kept your momentum for improv at least burning and going.
yeah, definitely. And I certainly see a symbiotic relationship now, especially like now that I'm on this team. Like I can take a lot of the stuff we're learning in practice and apply it to the show. I can work on something I'm trying to get right for our team on everything now, and then like try to integrate it into the show performance. I feel like coming out of the pandemic, I was less rusty maybe than a lot of people because I had been performing through the whole thing, albeit in kind of a weird way. And I was talking to someone about this. I've gotten so comfortable playing in silence because when we stream, you just read ha 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 ha, you know, like you don't have that 100 people's response in the room. And I think like the toughest thing for a lot of improvisers, especially early on, is like being comfortable in silence, because you can then build to a moment that's funny. But if you get thrown by that, you might throw the audience too, and then everyone's nervous and that laugh never comes.
It sounds like a burn, but a self burn, but it's not. Like being able to perform improv when they're not laughing is the skill. It is what you need. It's that's what separates the the novices from the professionals, is that when something doesn't go as planned and when the joke doesn't land, pivot, right? I think we've all been there. You initiate something and they don't laugh. So like, are we gonna do this for the whole scene? Maybe, maybe not. How well can you adapt to that? So
Yeah.
right, if you panic, then you're gonna make the wrong move. But if you're like, okay, that didn't work, let me reinitiate it with a different specific, or let me now like switch to organic, because they were picking
Yeah.
that up.
And the more that I'm watching like Harold's and Elefante and everything, like the more that I'm noticing at least 50% of the battle is just not being nervous. Like you can see in Harold or Lloyd when someone is nervous, how much it makes the audience nervous. And then they're doing stuff that I'm like, write that down and it's all good. But they're now like tense, and it's the audience is tense, and there's insecurity around the entire act.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you wanted to kind of sum it up or kind of talk about your journey through improv?
Um, I mean, just that, like, I think that's pretty much, it's funny, like when the pandemic hit, I was doing work study. I was the last work study student of the month ever, actually. And when it was gone, I thought it was over. And I was like, all right, no more UCV, whatever. And I got on with these auditions, and now I feel like as invigorated around it as ever. And I think it's very funny that I was like, really, like, don't worry about that anymore. It is gone. And now look like, oh, actually, I'm still here and it's going great now. So yeah, that was my only other thought, was like coming out of this, like in the last 5 months or whatever, I feel way more invigorated about improv as I have in a long time, because I
Yeah,
have everything now and this, and it's all feels very symbiotic.
and I mentioned this in with a couple of the past guests too, but like it was kind of nice to have that break, right? To
Yeah.
have UCB be gone for whatever it was, 2+ years. It was nice to just be like, there's still improv, right? Like without this one institution that previously I only relied on and only looked to. Now that it's gone, it's like, oh, there's a great world and a great community outside of it. You can make your own opportunities without it.
Yeah,
And
I think it gave everyone a healthier relationship with it, where
yeah,
everyone was able to be like, oh, okay, it's not just this like one thing. And now even coming back, I feel that like a lot of people who are on Harold or on Lloyd or something, it's like you can still see they're kind of doing a few other things. Like they're not completely like it's UCB or it's nothing, you know?
mhm,
Whereas I feel like it used to really feel that way, especially for me.
yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for walking us down your imposter syndrome journey. Lots of helpful tidbits in there for everybody. Let's go ahead and jump into our next segment now, which is going to be our topic of the week. Now, for this topic of the week, I'm really glad you chose this one. It's going to be support moves. And I got to say, after playing with you, I know it's only been 10 shows, but you're one of the most supportive players I've ever seen. You actually employ a lot of these different tools.
Well, thank you for saying that, because I really do. I mean, I'm glad this topic showed up in the options, because this is to me like the thing I pride myself on the most. This is the thing I'm like most invested in as an improviser, like trying to execute the most. I think not enough discussion around this.
And it's always, and here's the thing, first and foremost, I guess, is the thesis statement is, support moves should be in service to the, I guess you call them the principles, the main two. It shouldn't take over. You shouldn't be one of the new third characters. I think support moves, you have to listen to what's going on. you're kind of highlighting a joke. You're trying to make their joke funnier. If you're trying to come in there with your own joke, I would argue maybe that's a different conversation, but that's not a support move. That's a takeover move, which sure has a place. And if your team's cool with that, you can do that. But that's like first and foremost, I want to say support moves should be done in a way that's really supports what's going on already.
Yeah,
Do you have any
exactly.
other thoughts about support moves as a whole, like a thesis statement?
To me, this is where you really see the teamwork. And like, this is where you get to sort of define, does this team play well together? Are they working? Are they communicating together? Is this person, to your point, like, is this person's walk-ons in service of the game or in service of themselves? And like, I can recognize that immediately. Like, it takes me like 2 shows, and then I could go like, this person does it in service of the scene. This person does it to get themselves a laugh. And like, that to me is like huge in defining who you are as an improviser, you know?
All right, let's go ahead and break down some of the most common support moves. We might miss some, but we'll talk about the ones that we employ the most. And let's start with the most popular support move, the classic walk on. So, Chris,
Yes.
what's your approach, or what goes through your head when you're thinking about doing a walk on?
Well, it's definitely changed since being on this team. When with James, he actually made this very interesting observation I've been thinking about lately of like, in the first beats, your walk-ons are in service of the reality and will allow the unusual person to contrast against you. And then in second beats, your walk-ons can be in service of the game. You can come on to support the unusual idea, to also be an unusual person, to raise the stakes of that unusual behavior, to put it in a situation where, well, maybe that's a tag out. We'll wait on that. But to come out as someone who, you know, is higher status that this person's going to be unusual to or whatever. Sometimes a walk-on, the thing I think the walk-on is best for, better than any of these other things, is framing. So if you notice that the scene has not been framed, or there's some disagreement in the improvisers of like, what's the thing we're supposed to be talking about here? You can walk out and be like, hey, I noticed this, you know, like you can walk out, provide what you believe they're trying to negotiate the game to be, what the premise was about, and then walk back off and let them do their thing. You know, that to me is like one of the most beneficial ways you can just do a walk on.
I forgot who said it, but some teacher used to say this all the time. A good walk on should also walk off.
Yeah,
I think that might have been Billy Merritt, but he might have also heard it from someone else.
sounds like a Billy Merritt type thing. Yeah.
But it might have just been permeated throughout the improv verse. But yeah, like a good walk on should walk off, because like you mentioned, you're not there to take over the scene. If you think about any scene in life or whatever, sometimes someone may momentarily enter your life, but they're not there. They're not your new third best friend. They end up, leaving.
Yeah.
You know,
And it also begs the question, like, should this have been a tag out? Like, if you're going to be in this scene this whole time doing all this stuff, like, maybe you wanted to take the scene to a new place or so, you know, like, I don't know. It's circumstantial, obviously, but yeah, I agree that in general, like, if you're in a support position of the scene, like, you know, you're trying to support these two people in the scene rather than kind of like take it.
Another thing I want to kind of amend myself on this podcast, I've mentioned several times, I'm not a fan of the waiter move in a restaurant. We obviously all have eaten at restaurants. We know that there's a waiter there, but I think that it's so overdone. The fact how many times the waiters walked up, because when we eat, the waiter's there 3 times max, right? But after going through a couple more practices, and again, what James had mentioned, sometimes you need the waiter just to make the restaurant feel real. So if for some reason the restaurant feels, is this a real restaurant? Sometimes having a waiter can help support and make it feel real. But I would also argue you could be a waiter at a different table.
Yeah,
you don't have
absolutely.
to be at
And
their
also
table.
like, it's also good for if you're on a date scene or whatever, like we've been talking about in practice, like if you're on a date with a weird person, like you kind of give them a lot of leeway.
Mhm.
You're maybe gonna like let them be weirder for a longer time or whatever. Having that waiter come in as kind of just an objective third party can kind of highlight the unusual behavior.
Yeah.
And that can be good. And then I'll also say, like, it's cheap, probably the cheapest laugh you can get. But when the unusual person is being unusual and you just have a waiter walk up and go, what's going on here? Audience loves it every time. Like, it is so cheap. but man, it always works. Like if you just have someone saying their weird thing at a restaurant and then the waiter walks up, it's just like, so I'll come back with drinks later then. Like it always, for whatever reason,
I'm gonna give you some
always,
more time.
yeah, it just always kills.
But one thing I was
Works.
gonna say is, in terms of walk-ons, waiter or not, my approach for walk-ons is almost always stimulus. How do I throw more stimulus into this place? So sometimes they're even still figuring out and trying to frame what the game is. Sometimes you can throw them something and that'll at least help you define a rule. An example might be like if your game is, I don't know, every time you see someone eating, you have to cheer them on or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you may come on, you come in with an iced tea. You're like, does it work for drinks?
Yeah, yeah.
And if
Start
they
to
don't take
explore
it,
the
you're like,
logic.
yeah. And then you walk away. And then they're like, you didn't cheer for that person. Well, that was a drink. I only cheer for food. It helps you kind of define it as well. So I think it's a little bit more helpful. And again, if they don't take it, fair game. You're just a guy with iced tea in a scene.
Right.
It makes that whatever scene feel more lived in.
Yeah. And then the other thing I'll say is peas in a pod. Walk-ons are great for a peas in the pod scene because it sort of gives the unusual, it gives the voice of reason point of view in the scene that otherwise wouldn't be there.
Oh, you need it. And in fact, yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. Peas in a pod, dude, you need a walk-on.
Yeah.
Because if you have two people just agreeing with one another, it'll get children's show real quick.
Yeah, and because then at a certain point you just go like, okay, I guess this is normal. Like anything can be, like we were talking with James the other day about like, the unusual thing of the scene could be that Dracula's real, and I'm thinking in my head of like, who's to say that's unusual given all the shit I have watched in an improv scene, and like sometimes in a peas in the pod I'll have a moment where I'm like, okay, like maybe this is the world we're in, like maybe this is the base reality, because the base reality isn't always like Los Angeles 2023, like base realities can be weird, can have weird elements to them. It can be Dracula and Frankenstein hanging out. There's a base reality to that. So I think like the walk-ons are very helpful in like, this is the part that's weird. Yeah.
If they come out and they say, hey, I know you guys are waiting to meet Dracula. Everybody knows he's on vacation. And then what do you guys, blah, 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 great. Walk-ons, the more we talk about it, I realize this is almost too expansive of a support move because it's used so universally.
There's so many different ways to walk on.
Yeah. But specifically, we should be using it to serve the people on stage, should be trying to look for ways to expand their joke or expand their game. Let's talk about one now that's a bit more specific in how you can utilize it. That's going to be tag outs. Now, I used to be very pro tag out. I used to think that, walk-ons are like, you come in, you say one line, you walk out. Tag outs are where if you really want to take over the scene, this is your full license, right? So, I mean, obviously once you tag them out, they're gone. And then now you get to be that person. But I'll also go as far as to say that like, and I think this is a rule. Hopefully if it's not a rule, it should be a really strong suggestion, but you should always tag out the voice of reason, never tag out the unusual person.
I was going to ask you about this. I wanted to get your opinion on this because I think like Herald Night, I would say pretty hard to tag out the unusual person with that limited time frame you have. I've seen the unusual person get tagged out to the betterment of a scene. I think it's so rare. I think it's so hard to do. But sometimes, especially like when we talk about the momentum of the scene, the energy of the scene, if it's really funny to watch this voice of reason have to deal with this weird thing, particularly when we're talking about weird world games, I think sometimes it's fun to take that normal person and have them tour all the unusual places of this world, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. There's unfortunately, I do think the terminology that we use sometimes can be limiting. Voice of reason and unusual. But there's James Mastriani who teaches it this way, which I think is better. But he says, where's the heat of the scene? So where's the heat? Where's everybody focused on? So if you do have someone who is their voice of reason work is just so big and so funny, they're like, what the hell is going on? At that point, the heat's on him and you want to see that person freak out.
I remember I used to go to Outside Dog shows, which is Mastriani. And
Yeah.
I think Matt Newell was a guy who was on his team. And Matt Newell would play this like really angry, frustrated straight man, voice of reason. Like
Mhm.
he would get so heated. And I was like, yeah, just bring him to like 3 more weird guys. Like just keep showing him
Yeah.
weird guys and have him react to it. That's so fun. Like I'll
Yeah.
watch that for 20 minutes, you
So
know?
like in that example, if you tag out Mike Newell, you've kind of lost the momentum or the heat of the scene, even though that's the technically right thing to do.
Yeah.
That's so like it's like whenever you see a game shift or the funny part of a scene transition over to the voice of reason. I do agree, it's very rare, and you also have to be really experienced to notice that that's happened.
I mean, this is obvious, but like you can't tag out the unusual person and now you have 2 voices of reason or whatever. Like it has to be like a really weird world game. And I
Yeah.
think it's helpful if you've already established that before doing the tag run, because it might be jarring to maybe this is the one weird guy and everyone else is normal, and then you tag out and like I would almost, and again going back to like these layers of scenes, like I would almost rather we have a walk on or a scene painting, something establish, hey, the whole world is weird, and then you're like, okay, we got a weird world, now we can go on a tag run, like now we can go on let's go to a bunch of different places in this weird world. But yeah, I think predominantly the majority of the cases, especially when you're early on, you're tagging out the voice of reason in that scene and you're putting this in a new heightened setting.
Now, one last thing I want to ask about tag outs. This is maybe more advanced. And if you don't have an answer, that's fair. I'll just edit this part out. But it seems like there's 2 different philosophies with the tag out and how you kind of initiate this tag out. Because I mean, that's kind of what you have to do every time you tag out, to reinitiate. Do you like it better when they tag someone out and then they set them up with new stimulus and hope that they spike it? So if, for instance, the whole cheering people who eat food, it's a great game. But like, would it be better if I tagged you out and I just start eating a hamburger and hope that you'll do the right thing? Or should I tag out and have you already done it? So I tag out the voice reason. I say,
why are you cheering for me right now?
Yeah, like I'm just trying to eat my burger. Why are you? So there's like before it happened and after it happened. Do you have a preference or?
So this is this is I think a great conversation to be had. The second option is easier. It's safer, but to me it's less fulfilling. So when you do the second option, it's good for maybe you're not as close with your scene partners. Maybe you're really trying to establish something that's like not super clear yet. But like I'm thinking back to a scene from our shows recently where Josh was like IKEA. And we were doing this tag run with him where everyone kept saying he's like IKEA, which was kind of a vague game. And it was like, and I did a tag where I was on a date with him and I was like, I'm really looking for someone who's going to like be able to like kind of read me like, or someone who I can kind of read like an instruction manual, someone who can give me kind of a step-by-step guide on how to like put them together and make them whole. And he was like, are you saying kind of like IKEA? And I was like, oh, that's such a great way of putting it. And that got a huge laugh from the audience because we were like 3 tags in at that point. And it was like, if another person just comes out and goes, you know, you're a perfect boyfriend for me because you're so much like IKEA, like it wouldn't quite have hit, you know? Or if I jumped into the second half of that conversation and went, yeah, I guess the thing I am looking for in a relationship is a lot like IKEA. That's a great way of putting it. It would have been okay, but like, to me, there's a heightening, there's a like a subtle, almost subtextual heightening in doing it the first way.
Yeah. I mean, you're basically the audience can get ahead of it. So you have to not only heighten the game, you have to heighten how you present or how you play the game.
Exactly. You know? So if our game is going to be, we keep calling Josh IKEA, how can you heighten that? You can heighten it in one way of
and
like,
you let him say he's like IKEA.
Yeah, you could be like, what if weirder people called him IKEA or more high status people called him IKEA? But I was like, what if you found more convoluted ways for him to become called IKEA, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's when I feel like, and I also just think like as an audience member, I'm much more impressed when someone walks out and just starts eating the hamburger and someone comes and goes, you know, and like you see that happen with like no verbal communication. But I've seen many times someone clearly try to set that up and then it's not hit.
Yeah.
And then that's how you can deflate an entire set. So it's like a risk you take. But I think if you trust your scene partners, if you have a really clear game, like you should always skew towards the former.
That's what I was exactly gonna say. It's a riskier option. I agree that like it's the more satisfying one. Artistically, it feels the best, and it's just it truly feels like improv at that moment
Yeah.
because you didn't say a joke. You said I'm eating a hamburger.
Yeah.
They, then just yes and it and respond to it with their game move.
Yeah. And going back to like a more general sense, like that's the support moves I love to make.
Yeah.
Like to me, there's something so, obviously the big laugh gets me a lot of serotonin and makes me feel good. But like when I can set up a big laugh and when I can know I'm doing the kind of like mental gymnastics to be like, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to say this. It's not going to be funny, but then this person's going to do this. That will trigger the funny thing.
Yeah.
That makes me feel so like that's when I really start getting the juices flowing as an improviser of
It's like being
damn,
2 moves
look at
ahead
us
in
go.
chess or something.
Yeah, exactly. You feel like ahead of the curve. You feel like you're like kind of you're almost directing the scene in that point. And then you start to like that's when I feel really excited in a scene.
Yeah. Now I want to speak to the other side where you present it as if it already happened. Now this is something that a lot of teachers will teach. A lot of coaches will give you this note. And I think you mentioned before, it's all about trust. If you can trust each other, but trust isn't earned overnight. I always say
Oh,
this
yeah.
too. When people are like, I got your back. I'm like, don't say it, man. Show it. I need to feel that you got my back. So a way to do that, a way to establish that is sometimes the first couple of times you're playing or practicing with a new team or a new group is by doing the consequential ones. Cause then it proves that whenever you tag out, you know what the game is and you know how it's supposed to happen. No, it won't be as satisfying and no, it won't pop as much, but I think those are the moves that you do to establish trust. And after they see that you get it for a while, now they know they're kind of programmed. When you tag someone out,
Yeah.
you got the game queued up and I just had to spike whatever you're about to say.
You're developing your team's shared language,
Yeah.
and that'll get into once we get into the hot takes. That's what mine's
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
be about. But we'll
But
get
one last
there.
thing I'll say about that is there is a way to make these moves land a little bit better. I think this is more of like a joke writing performance thing. We'll use my hilarious cheering on food, right?
I could watch 10 beats of that game. I just
Thanks so
want
much.
to say.
Yeah, but you're gonna with this discussion. But my approach, and you don't have to use this, but I think that this works out the best, is you need to lay out, just like in any scene, base reality, unusual, and then reaction, right? So if I were to set that up, if you want to do the consequential and still kind of make it land fun or not like deflate the energy and momentum, it's always just, like, hey, I'm so sorry. I'm on my lunch break and I'm just trying to enjoy this hamburger in peace. You've been yelling at my ear for the last 20 minutes and I'm losing my appetite. Like you lay it out that way, I think it's going to be better because it kind of strings them on a little bit and sets up on this new kind of reality and this new momentum before that unusual game pops again. Versus if you start off, hey, stop yelling at me. I'm trying to eat my lunch. Then it's like, ooh, you already took the steam out, the gas out at the beginning of the sentence.
Yeah, if it's almost adding stakes to give that whole thing up top of like, hey, I'm telling you now that like I am not enjoying this. Because then it's like, okay, how am I as the unusual guy gonna do it again anyway? And like that's gonna be funny. Because you're like, I think you are, or like, okay, I can't stop myself. Like, it goes back to what type of game is this? Is this a guy who just knows he's not supposed to be cheering people on when they eat, but can't prevent himself? Or is it someone who like really believes people do want this and it makes a difference in their lives? Like then you get to explore that philosophy.
Yeah. It's like, bro, you're a great chewer. What am I supposed to do? Sit here and just watch you chew? All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next type of support, which is going to be scene painting. Underutilized, I'll just say first of all.
A type of walk on too, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, it's a walk. It's a walk on where you're invisible.
Yeah, which is like perhaps the most generous type of walk on, where you're literally just going on and going, here's a thing that's in the room, and then walking away.
Let's actually dive into this because I just realized this. When you do a scene paint, do you step out of the back line or do you do it from the back line?
I will typically do it from the back line, but I might like gesture with my hand. So
Mhm.
like, let's say there's a clock on the wall. I might like point to the clock from the back line and be like, we see a clock on the wall that's like spinning very fast,
Yeah.
implying time's moving very quickly or whatever.
I think the improviser in me likes to be like as invisible as possible. So I may not even move. You may just hear me yell, we see that she's wearing gold slippers, right? But
Yeah.
I think now if I have my directing cap on, the performative aspect of it is much more clean if you actually step out. So everybody kind of like stops for a second. We notice you take focus, and then you walk over and you like kind of touch the shoes. Like we see that she's wearing gold slippers, and you slip back in. I
Yeah.
think performance, stage picture wise, that's actually cleaner, even though I don't do that.
I love a good scene paint because it adds richness to we're doing this in a black box theater. There's nothing on stage except some chairs or whatever. I honestly, that's something I like want to work on more. And because I do everything now where we have physical props and backgrounds, it's like not at top of mind anymore.
Yeah.
But like adding a richness to the world, filling out the space more, creating that image for the audience more, like scene painting's great for that. And I think it's supportive in the game and also just supportive in like the texture of the scene.
Kind of a sub thing about this scene paint. This is kind of like a scene paint. It's like a scene clip or a scene uh, um, audio, but I do love offstage sounds, offstage dialogue. And sometimes, and I understand that a lot of times improv is very meta, but I hate it when people call it out.
Hmm.
So one thing that I love to do, probably my favorite support move ever, is to be like a guy in the back. Hey, keep it down.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want
Someone
to be in this. I mean, yeah,
next door neighbor, or something like that, where you're just,
exactly.
again, and usually that's often that, and at least initially starts on the side of the voice of reason. Maybe
Mhm.
the neighbor goes, "Hey, keep it down." And then, then they say, "I'm trying to compliment my husband's chewing," or whatever. And then you're like, "Oh, okay, they're unusual." But at least,
Oh, then go ahead.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But at least in the initial, you're like, "Oh, okay, you're kind of filling out the world. You're
Yeah.
creating more of the base reality or whatever."
All right. So that brings me to this next thing. So we're talking about, again, this is kind of like culminating. We have offstage dialogue, scene painting, walk on. You put all those together, and guess what, baby? You got a phone call. What do you think about phone calls?
I love a good phone call. I've actually been told by multiple teachers to really like avoid phone calls, particularly, and maybe this is more of phone calls when you're in the scene.
Mhm.
Like I think people kind of poo-poo like doing a scene that is a phone call. I personally think it's great, great, can be bad. Maybe it's less active initially, but you have
Mhm.
tons of places to go with it. But I think a phone call is like, again, I'm just thinking about the last show where I call Avery as her landlord. Avery's struggling to pay rent, right? Well, then who does that affect? That's also the landlord's going to be relevant to that. So let's, rather than me tag her out and go, "Hey, now you're meeting with your landlord." Suddenly I've completely derailed that scene. Now it's like her relationship with the landlord, when the fun of that scene is her and her friend spending a bunch of money irresponsibly and then being hyper aware of it. So I think a phone call is great. And I'm a sucker for when we all do that thing where we move our hand out and kind of do this with our hand,
Ring
just kind of,
ring.
yeah, ring 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 ring. That to me always makes me laugh, that we've all just agreed that's how a phone call works. It's very funny to me.
Yeah. I mean, I love phone call moves when they're done right, but I just, you see so many not connect. And that's the most important thing, is that they don't connect. Is like sometimes they don't answer right away, or they answer it and they don't take it well.
Yeah.
Or you ever seen the one where someone hangs up, another one doesn't know that they hung up?
Oh
I think
yes, yes. Again,
also,
it's a risky stage picture game you're playing,
yeah,
kind of like having two congruent. That's the other. It reminds me almost of like the scenes where two groups are talking
the
and you're
swinging
trying to,
door. Yeah.
yeah, because it's like more likely than not they're going to be talking over each other and you're not going to hear any conversation really
Yeah.
well.
So again, the director and me would say best stage picture, walk out to their eye line and be on the phone. So that way you can make eye, like that's so crucial. Having eye contact.
Yeah.
That way you can both be on the phone. But again, I've been guilty. I'm not gonna like sit here and tell you I'm perfect. I've made phone calls from behind the person before. That's not helpful.
if you really just need to convey one little game move on the phone, maybe you just do the ring ring. Hey, it's your neighbor, blah blah blah. Okay, bye. And in and out. Like that's the director in me being like, how much are you going to do? That's how much you should be invading the scene.
Yeah. All right. Last one here is going to be a support movie that people don't ever think about. I know they teach it this way. I know they talk about it, but I think people forget about it as soon as they leave 401. But the edit is probably the most important support move.
Oh yeah. I can think of multiple heralds in this run that I've been watching where I have just been like, there it is. That's the point to edit the scene. And it didn't happen. And then just like 3 minutes of bad scene follows. And you were just like, damn, they had a perfect scene. They just needed to edit it right there and they missed it. And when you miss that chance, you like can deflate an entire set. And also the reverse can happen. I've seen edits happen like on the first game move. And I'm like, well, now we're not even really going to get to like we didn't even get to see the fun of the scene happen really. Because maybe they took too long to get there and we're trying to do a fast set or whatever. But I'm like, there really is this like golden spot, sweet spot right in the middle where like this is the time to be editing. Like we've established 2 or 3 of our game moves here. We know exactly where we are. We can imagine where the next scene will be. And then you're 1 foot out on the back wall waiting to go. And at the first moment of like a closing part of a game move or a good laugh, you go across and end it.
Yeah. We were talking about building trust earlier. That's something that I do in almost every class, every workshop, every practice group I join. Whenever it's people I don't know, the first thing I always do is I establish myself to be the editor. And if there's someone else, great. But if there's no one, it's like when no one's going to edit. So I'm always like keen to be like, I'll edit every scene if I have to. Because it is a great way to like establish trust where they're like, he's listening, he's paying attention. He's not thinking about himself. He's not thinking about what he's going to have for lunch or his move. He's listening to our scene. And when he realizes there's been 3 game moves or he realizes that's the biggest laugh, we'll run across. I will also say that, there's lots of different ways to edit a scene. There's lots of other scenes, sometimes scenes need to they call them like mercy edits. Whatever the case is, I do think that, I don't know why this goes such a long way, but edit with a smile.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than like when the edit is kind of like, okay, and they like kind of saunter across, like calling, like it's almost being like, well, this didn't work, and they're like walking, and it's like that drives me nuts.
Yeah, even if it is awkward, even if it's awkward, even if it's bad, you can at least laugh about it. You're like, oh my God, it's awkward.
Yeah.
And that's at least enjoyable. And the audience can get behind that more so than the, oh, brother.
Also, like, especially when you're not doing Herald Night, when you're playing to the uncles, like they don't know. It's the same thing when you're playing a song and like you miss one beat or whatever, and they're just like, just pretend that was what the song called for. Like if you wipe with confidence or edit with confidence that that's what you were supposed to be doing, then they'll probably just be like, okay, I didn't get it. The scene was supposed to end there. And then when you bring your second callback to it or whatever, they go, oh, wow, they edited it there because then this was going to happen. These guys are so smart, even though they don't know that we were just like, oh, we kind of never found the button, and then went across,
All right. 2 hotly contested questions about editing. First one, do you ever edit your own scene?
Oh, so I had James Dwyer when I was in academy. He gave me this note. You can edit your own scene as long as you didn't say the final line.
All right. Secondly, hotly contested question here. No right or wrong answers. I want to hear your personal preference. What are you doing with your hands when you run? Are you pulling an invisible curtain?
I have one hand up like this. Yeah.
Yeah. You do the karate chop.
Yeah. I have one hand like limply up in the air. I'm not going to do this. This is like too intense for me.
So not a right angle, but just casual.
Yeah, and I'll kind of just like couple fingers up, hand up, and I'm just sort of. What about you?
I've been editing the same way since I think it was like 201 or 301. But like when you're crossing the street and there's a car waiting to turn, and you kind of walk
Yeah, you do that
fast,
little hat. Yeah.
little like half jog, but you're not going faster.
Yeah.
You just do it to make them think that like I'm hustling, but I'm really not.
Yeah.
That's how I edit every single scene. I am walking still, but I'm like shaking
Yeah. The
my hands like
illusion
a
of
jogger.
speed. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way.
All right. Any other thoughts on support moves? Any other support moves maybe missing out on?
Yeah. I think that pretty much covers it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, again, support moves, everybody. Do it to support the principles in the scene, and have a good time doing it.
Yes.
All right, great. We're gonna go and go on to our last segment now, which is our
Hot Improv Takes.
I've got a
Uh,
good one.
would you like to kick us off with your hot improv take?
Yeah. So my hot take, and I have to give a caveat here of like, if you're just starting out, if you're doing practice groups or whatever, or like if you're just trying to get stage time, like you can't avoid it. But I think like if you're a more seasoned improviser and like you have a team you practice regularly with, like doing improv with other people is actually going to be a detriment. And I actually think I would rather watch Bitchin do a set than watch a jam set of like Ben Schwartz and Betsy Sodero and all these incredible improvisers. Because they are going to have very little chemistry on stage together. And while they're individually very funny people, the cohesion will not be there. Whereas Bitchin have been performing together for 5 years or whatever. And I think so much of improv is like what we've been talking about, of establishing the group mind, of the teamwork, of all that stuff. And like, yeah, my hot take is I would rather watch a 5-year veteran Herald team than a thrown together team of people a bunch of people who have been on TV lately, you know?
Pretty hot take. Pretty hot take. You're gonna be hurting Ben Schwartz and Friends ticket sales. But I
Yeah,
get
I
what
don't
totally
think
get what
they're
you're
going to
saying.
struggle with ticket sales. Something
Yeah.
tells me they'll be fine.
That's very fair. All right, I'll give my hot improv take, but I want to preface this. I've actually been getting a lot of comments that my hot improv takes are too hot. But that's the point. I'm trying to
Yeah.
stir the pot. And there's also a little bit of height in here. So obviously I don't think this in my heart, but I'm going to say it on this podcast. All right. Hot improv takes. People in the audience should talk to each other during your show. I think it'd be fun
That's
sometimes.
a really hot take.
Yeah, I know. That's why I had to preface it. I don't 100% mean it, but like, look, I don't want to name any names or whatever, but I was sitting next to my friend the other day. We were watching an improv show, and it was just so delightful to like turn to them and say like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I was talking during a set. But like, you know, sometimes they throw out specifics that I don't understand. Like it's sports specific. And I'd be like, I don't play baseball. What's going on here?
Yeah.
And he'll explain it to me. And that made my experience so much better. Sometimes it makes more laughter. Like I remember a scene happened recently and they were like listing different frozen foods. And then they said, Hungry Man dinners. And I laughed, but then my friend didn't. I was like, do you not know what Hungry Man is? And then I pulled up my phone. I also take out my phone. I was like, that's Hungry Man. It's like, oh, we don't have that where I grew up. Oh, interesting. And then, you know, I don't know. I just think that's.
I hear that. And I think there's a way to do that. I think the non-hot take version of that is, hey, I'm in a packed show and I'm like close to the back and I'm whispering to my friend and my brightness is all the way down and I'm pulling up Hungry Man on my phone or whatever. But I think that the danger is there's a scene going on and two people are just having an audible conversation of like, oh yeah, Hungry Man, it's like it's in the freezer section and and then it's just like a bunch of people around them can hear. Like I think that's the fear of like talking at an improv show is like, am I now detracting from the stage thing by like?
Well, I do a show at the Lyric Hyperion, and if you haven't been there, it's really small.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this one couple who was sitting in the front row, and they were talking, and I low key kind of enjoyed it because they would laugh. Obviously, and I was like, oh, I'm very flattered. They would whisper something to their partner, and then their partner would laugh. I'm like, they're talking about me, like
Yeah, I think
it
there's a way it
multiplied some
works.
of the fun, or they're joking about it. I don't know if it's an inside joke, but it's nice that like my joy can ripple effect, create more joy.
Yeah, and I think it works. And there's a way to have, polite conversation in the crowd or whatever. But there's a world where that is so dangerous.
Sure. Look, I don't. Again, I know that this is intentionally an intentionally hot hot take here, but I guess I'll just say Try it out. You might like it. And if you get shushed, or if you get chided about it, then stop. But try it out for a couple. That's my hot take, anyways.
Well, if you want to do that, you should watch the Everything Now show, where you can constantly just change the direction of any scene at any given time by giving us $2.
It's a great segue into plug. So Chris, thanks so much for coming on. Let us know what you got going on.
So thanks for having me on. Firstly, super fun to just talk about improv, do very inside baseball stuff here. You can see me for a very short time. I don't even know if this episode will be out before our last show, but you can see me for a very short time performing with Odyssey. It's great. We're a great team. We're such a good team. Really fun show. And then other than that, I do the show on Twitch, which we've discussed at length. Everything Now show, interactive green screen comedy show. It's very fun, very silly. You can engage with the show all throughout it. It's heavily interactive. And one of the great things about being on Odyssey has been I've been able to get a ton of UCB folks on lately. A trend I imagine is going to continue. So if you're a UCB person listening to this, if you have your favorites on Herald Night, check out the show, because I probably have had them on the show or will soon have them on the show. So a lot of incredible improvisers have been on that show, I gotta say. We've had John Gavris on, we've had James Adomian on, we've had Cale Hills on. It's quite a treat. And all the previous episodes are available on YouTube, and all the current episodes will air on Twitch. So check it out.
Hit them up with that schedule.
Every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, we go from 7 to 9 Pacific. And on Saturday, we go from 6 to 8 Pacific. So check it out then. It's great to watch live. I think live's the best way. But we also do have the YouTube. So please subscribe to the YouTube also. While you're subscribing to David's YouTube, pop on over, subscribe to mine.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks so much for stopping by to talk to us about support moves from a real support maestro.
Hey, really a pleasure, David.
All right. Take care. Bye, everybody. Awesome, man. Great episode.
That was great.